If you have been around the lowdown for a minute or two, you already know where I stand on our modern nutrition education and our latest in diet culture, which I feel like needs a significant upgrade. So let's talk about it. It's January, which makes sense to then really kind of evaluate maybe our relationship with our overall nutrition patterns, our overall nutrition mindset. And one of the biggest kind of beefs that I tend to have around this time of year is no one ever wants to talk about their nutrition for anything other than changing their overall external appearance. And I honestly just think that's boring. Right? It's because we know that food has so much more power over our entire physiology. It is our body's mainstream source of medicine. It's our first source of medicine. And without us having a really great nutritional dialogue and a great nutritional understanding, all we get penciled and kind of boxed into is this conversation around nutrition as it pertains to diet culture. And if that's you, that's great. That's awesome. Full send support. You're not going to have fun here. You're not going to enjoy it here. So just full warning that we're going to be talking about food and nutrition from a whole different perspective, something that is a lot more interesting and much more exciting than how food alters our external body composition, because I'm bored with it. I think it's outdated and I think we need a better thought process. So here we are. So I'm not necessarily interested in talking about nutrition as math or morality or our discipline or our willpower. You're definitely, like I said, going to hear a totally different message for that outdated belief here, and why we want to really be talking about this differently. So if you listen to last week's episode, I wanted to jump off the new year talking about how we are abandoning diets and really going for data. I talked about the 5 main lab markers that we can and should be using as nutrition professionals, healthcare professionals, to really understand how to customize someone's diet for their biology and for their physiology. To me, this has just always been so wild of why this isn't a very common pattern, why this isn't a very common teaching in all healthcare sectors and all healthcare spheres, right? Because we know that data can really drive a lot of differences from person to person, but yet we're still stuck on different camps, different dogmas, different teams, and really different blanket and cookie cutter routines. And again, I feel like we need a major overhaul and a major upgrade. And I think 2026 is the year that we're going to do it. And I'm definitely going to start out the year by talking about it so that you can hear how me and the lowdown and the holistic medicine methods that I have developed as my signature methods and systems has really helped people have a completely different relationship and understanding with food once they understand how their body understands food. So today's episode is going to be the next layer of this conversation. Last week we really talked about, again, diving into the data. How can you look at your own labs and looking at your own labs, what are those things that you should be picking out in terms of understanding what type of nutritional pattern or what type of nutritional tweaks are going to be most supportive for you and your body, and being able to then really block out and put the blinders on around things that are not pertainable to you. How refreshing and how empowering to have someone be able to go through your lab work, go through your data and tell you yeah, you can ignore that. Or that piece of nutritional advice that someone else is following and it worked beautiful for them, but you try it on and it feels awful for you. Yeah, this is why this would feel awful for you, and you can ditch that, right? So sometimes we kind of need a little bit of permission to be able to ditch and block out some of the diet noise and really understand, okay, this is data. What is going to work best for your physiology and your biology right now? Stop trying to follow things that are not designed for you. You will make yourself crazy by doing that. And I think one of the other natural places where people feel this level of kind of frustration and confusion is when we really start to think about food quality. Right? We start to think about, especially the world of elimination diets is also another really blanket and very heavily pushed area of where people feel like they understand nutrition, or they think I eat really clean, but my gut feels worse than ever. Or the more healthy or the more disciplined that I try to be with my food, the more reactive I feel like my body becomes. And I've tried every elimination diet, and now I tolerate fewer and fewer and fewer foods than I ever did before. And I was promised that this would heal me, right? So there's just a lot of different misunderstandings, I think, about what the world of elimination diets is truly meant for, and how we are not, in my opinion, using them correctly at all. And I see so many individuals walk in here and they have never even been taught what their food reactions are trying to tell them. That is the key feature here. This is not looking at and understanding, okay, I eat that food and my skin breaks out, or I include more of that in my diet and I feel more bloated and more constipated. That's a really solid message, but the message is not to then just eliminate that food. That's the misunderstanding, right? That is where we're not using the diagnostic nature of these food communication channels appropriately at all. And I'm going to talk today about how to look at it the right way. And how I always, like I said, think that food reactions are very, very telling. And if we know how to listen to them, all of a sudden it becomes crystal clear of what we should be focusing on, instead of just putting ourselves into further and further restriction and further elimination. Because I'm telling you right now, that is not treatment plan. If someone just handed you an elimination diet, that is not treatment. And it's really a Band-Aid. So sorry about that. But really, like I said, when individuals get themselves into this food elimination spiral, it can cause a lot of confusion. It can cause a lot of overwhelm, can cause a lot of frustration, a lot of self-doubt. And let's be real, these food eliminations also really affect someone's quality of life, their ability to participate in normal social circles, their ability to eat outside the home and feel resilient to being able to travel. You guys would, I don't think you would be surprised, but you would also be incredibly saddened by the amount of stories that I have heard from individuals, and how food and their body's reaction to foods and the slippery slope that they've gotten themselves in with elimination diets, how much life they have missed out on. And that, to me, that's the motivating factor right there, is just to be able to feel more resilient and never have to say no to a social event because of food restrictions or food eliminations, or to have to say no to being able to travel, or feel like it takes the enjoyment out of some of these things, right? So on paper, I think a lot of individuals feel like they're doing everything right. They're following things by the book. They're following the restrictive elimination diet that some practitioner told them is going to heal them. But the reality is no one is talking about the fact that this is not about food. This is not the food, is not the problem. And eliminating foods is honestly just another Band-Aid that's wrapped in this like root cause medicine mask. Okay. Elimination diets do nothing to actually treat what is going on in your gut. And today, that's, like I said, what I really want to talk about it, why elimination diets can go sideways, and what is actually our gut and our body trying to tell us about what we should be focusing on instead, when we're seeing some of these very specific food responses. So to kind of dive us into the current landscape, let's first talk about the environment that we're living in today really needs a different approach. Our bodies have massively shifted and massively changed, and a big part of that is our immune system. The immune system is a big component of how we tolerate certain things coming in from our external environment, whether it is the increased instance of food sensitivities in kiddos, increased incidence of allergies in both kids and adults. Like, guys, this is the immune system, as well as food reactions and food sensitivities causing skin irritation, causing massive autoimmune problems. Like, that is the environment that we're living in right now, is a time of widespread immune dysregulation. And I want that to really hit home, because we're going to come back to this. The immune system is is the bread and butter of this conversation, but we've made the conversation about food. And that is just, it's wrong. We're blaming the wrong culprit here. And if we're not truly understanding that the communication is coming from the immune system and it's the immune system crying out for help, we're constantly blaming the wrong victim or let's put it this way. Let's use my superhero terminology correctly. We're choosing the wrong villain. And by choosing the wrong villain, then we're not truly being able to listen to the victim that is the immune system in this situation. So I think this has been building much longer than this, but call it our post-COVID immune systems, chronic stress, burnout, years of underfueling, overstimulation, white knuckling our way through, like I said, things that we think are healthy, but they're not actually associated with our biology and our physiology. All of a sudden, someone starts reacting to a lot of different foods, and your instinct makes perfect sense here. Your instinct thinks something must be wrong with the food, right? Something I'm eating must be what's doing it. And from a survival standpoint, the brain loves to find a bad guy, and the brain loves to find kind of like a quick fix. And so naturally, food is a very convenient thing to blame. Okay. And so especially when symptoms show up very closely correlated with foods, they show up with bloating, reflux, brain fog, rashes, anxiety, joint pain, fatigue. So we remove the foods, and then things might temporarily feel a little bit better, but then all of a sudden we're removing more foods. Then we're removing entire categories of foods. And at first, like I said, it helps, which is why elimination diets get these like glowing reviews really early on. But hear me when I say relief is not resolution. I'm going to say that again in a more full sentence. Do not confuse relief with resolution. Those are two very, very different things. And this is where things really start to go sideways. And we start to see where elimination diets might feel logical, but they're actually a very big physiological mismatch. And because of that, they're not really doing what we think they're doing. And quite frankly, in more situations, they're causing more harm than good. And again, it's not because we're doing elimination diets through a total misguided approach. There is some really good intention here. And like I said, it makes sense that an individual would want to find some relief when their body is genuinely struggling. It's just that if the logic becomes like, if fewer foods, like if by eliminating foods cause symptoms, then I must need even fewer foods to continue to see symptom resolution. And biologically, it's the exact opposite that is true for our body, right? Our body does not thrive on restriction, and our body does not thrive on the same 5 foods on repeat. And that's where I see a lot of individuals, maybe they're not there yet, but they're on this track towards. I see people on all sorts of ends of the spectrum where they're like just starting this elimination diet like mindset and starting to blame the foods. And then I've seen people that are 20 years in and they're like, gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free, almond-free, soy-free. I'm like, whoa, what happened, right? Where did we get to this place to where now they're coming and seeing me and they're like, and I think bananas and avocados also bother me too. I'm like, it's not the food. That's very helpful diagnostic information for me. But what's actually happening underneath the surface is poor digestion. Okay, whether that is low stomach acid, poor bile flow, nervous system dysregulation, your body is unable to completely break down food. That is the start of immunogenicity, right? Or sometimes we call it antigenicity. That is why food becomes reactive to your immune system in the first place, is incomplete digestion. Step 1. That undigested food material then becomes fuel for overgrowths of these bacteria particles in the gut, specifically in the small intestine, because we're not digesting food at the level of the mouth or the stomach. And so undigested food then falls into the small intestine. Where does 75% of your immune system live? In the small intestine. So we're getting these big undigested food particles, and all of a sudden those undigested food particles are feeding the small intestinal bacteria, and now we end up with things like SIBO, dysbiosis, SIFO, even emo. It's like all of these different gastrointestinal diagnoses. I'm like, dude, you have poor digestion of food, right? And these overgrowths then, if they go unchecked, they damage the gut lining, they cause intestinal permeability, and now all of a sudden we're activating the immune system in more of a systemic response, ergo, someone ends up being diagnosed with autoimmune disease. That is the progression. So knowing if someone has autoimmune patterns, they're at the end of this spectrum. This has been going on for a long time now, right? Where they're actually getting these autoimmune conditions, but then conventional medicine wants to treat like the downstream consequence of the immune system. They're like, oh, you have Hashimoto's, so this is a thyroid issue. I'm like, Hashimoto's is not a thyroid issue. This is an immune system issue. Or it's like you see it all across the board, right? So I won't make this an autoimmune episode. This is purely a food eliminations episode. And those individuals are really the ones struggling, because once the immune system is activated, food reactions are not about food. They are not about food. They're about an immune system overloaded, okay? This is where it goes from my stomach is feeling off to like full-blown reactivity, autoimmune patterns, leaky gut, systemic symptoms. And none of that is going to get fixed or put into remission by eating fewer foods. It's just is not going to happen. That's not the treatment. And so this is where it starts to ruffle some feathers. But some of the most well-educated, most highly credentialed, and well-meaning professionals are still out there. They're still out there pumping this advice that intentionally worsens the pattern. Okay, so they see reactivity and they might be, oh, here's a low FODMAP diet. We need to eliminate gluten and dairy and sugar. We need to go AIP paleo. And listen, the intention there is good, but the execution is really missing the bigger picture. If someone feels better on a low FODMAP diet, that does not mean that that is their forever strategy. That should tell you as a practitioner, that is a diagnostic tool. You do not keep someone on a low FODMAP diet. You put someone on a low FODMAP diet for 2 to 3 days to see if their symptoms improve. And then that is a diagnostic tool for you as a practitioner to then work them up for SIBO. Right? It's like, that's not the fix. The FODMAP diet is not the fix. And that goes for everything. It's like I said, low histamine diet, AIP, gluten-free, dairy-free, like these things should be used more diagnostically than they are right now. We're using them too long-term. And by doing that, we're really putting people at a worsened state instead of at a better state. And again, that's where it just like, it gets really weird in our psyche, because when we get some immediate relief from these food eliminations, it's really hard to break that psychological spiral of when we feel better, all of a sudden, then that becomes a truth to the brain, right? And it's hard for us to interpret it a different way and to understand like, okay, even if I feel relief does not mean resolution. And I'm constantly talking to my patients about this so that we're on the same mindset of like, okay, if eliminating that food right now feels better, that's okay. But don't think that that relief is the ultimate resolution. We're going to take that as diagnostic data and we're going to truly get you resolution. All right. And resolution now means, what are the clues that we should be thinking of clinically? If I'm getting food reactions, what should that be telling me? One, it should be telling me it's not about the food, but then what should I be investigating instead? So I'm just going to talk about 3 of the most common ones that I see in practice. There's a lot more, but I'm going to talk about some of the most common ones. That way, in case this is something that you have dealt with or you know someone that has, you can point them in a better direction of someone to be able to help them. So even like clue number 1, right, is let's stay on this like low FODMAP train. If you're not familiar with a low FODMAP diet, it is commonly prescribed to individuals that are told that they have IBS. Now, 80% of people that have IBS actually have what's called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This is very treatable. And again, a low FODMAP diet, of course, it initially feels better because we're removing fiber. Okay, a low FODMAP diet is really a low fiber diet. and they're like, wow, I feel so much better. It's like, yeah, that's not a long-term solution. We have to figure out, why is your body not tolerating fiber? So if high FODMAP foods are causing bloating or causing pain, usually, like I said, our brain is like, oh, go low FODMAP, which is essentially just swapping high fiber foods for low fiber foods. And like, a low FODMAP diet is very like white bread, white rice, white pasta, and removing a lot of like vegetables and fruits. And the biological question that we should be asking, why is the body not tolerating fiber? Why is fermentation happening in the small intestine? Because essentially that's what's happening. What we should be investigating instead, and what I investigate then, is you can't be on a low FODMAP diet forever. I only want you on it for maybe a few days, right? And then what we should be doing, I need to work you up for SIBO. I'm definitely going to be looking at your bile flow and stomach acid, because that's usually why people develop SIBO in the first place, right? We talked about that. Undigested food or poor digestive capacity. So we should be working up for SIBO. We should be working up for poor bile flow, low stomach acid, problems with what's called the migrating motor complex, that is part of the gut-brain axis, and very closely tied to that, working up for dysautonomia, which is part of that central nervous system as well too. So again, low FODMAP's just a diagnostic tool, and it should then be telling me, what do I need to work them up for? What should I be testing them for? Because this is a clue, not me supporting or handing them a low FODMAP diet. Very similar, like, so that's one that I tend to see a lot in practice. Clue number 2 that I've been seeing more and more is gut healthy foods actually make you feel worse, meaning all of the foods that are like touted as your like healthy gut foods, like fermented foods, like sauerkraut and kimchi and kefir, or bone broth, or collagen powder, or avocados. These foods are very high in what we call histamine. Histamine is released from the mast cells of your immune system, right? So if you're responding or reacting to these gut healthy foods, like I see a lot of people who come in and they're like, man, the healthier that I eat, the worse that I feel. So then usually I dig a little bit. I'm like, what's your definition of like healthy? They're like, well, I started putting collagen in my coffee. I started meal prepping. I started doing like avocado toast in the morning. I started doing like kefir and kimchi like in my salads. And I'm like, this is a histamine issue, right? So the solution is not to put them on a low histamine diet, right? A low histamine diet, just for anybody out there, you can't eat leftovers. What kind of life is that? Like, okay, you're going to prep and cook every single meal for the rest of your life from scratch. No one's doing that, right? You can't eat canned foods. You can't eat prepared foods. Like, a low histamine diet is like serious business. And I can't tell you how many people are just throwing a low histamine diet around like it's like, yeah, that's the treatment. I'm like, no, ma'am, that is not the treatment. So this should really think about, where is the overall histamine load coming from? Because obviously their immune system has too much of a histamine load. So we should be thinking about overgrowths in the gut, yeast, fungal patterns, parasitic overgrowths, mold exposure. The liver is obviously overburdened and cannot clear histamines well, right? So any of those like histamine-based foods, that should clue me off into, again, what am I looking deeper at? And then the third clue that I'll leave you with is sulfur-rich foods. So common high sulfur-rich foods are things like garlic, onions, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, eggs, alcohol, specifically wine, and even certain protein powders. So these like more higher sulfur rich foods, maybe they feel, like I said, a lot of gas, a lot of bloating, a lot of loose stools. Again, the question is not to eliminate these foods. The question is, what is contributing to a high sulfur load in their body? I need to test them for hydrogen sulfide SIBO, compromised detoxification pathways, liver congestion issues, mineral imbalances that are needed to process sulfur, like molybdenum. Like, sulfur is essential. It's a good thing in the body. It's crucial for detox and antioxidant capacity, but if these pathways are overwhelmed, if these sulfation pathways are overwhelmed, the solution is not to remove high sulfur rich foods. The solution is to open up these detox pathways, right? So this is just where, again, don't get me started on like food sensitivity testing, but you can start to see very quickly how a lot of those things like just miss the mark. Like we're missing the forest for the trees here, right? We're too distracted on all the wrong things, blaming foods, wanting to run food sensitivity testing, wanting to eliminate foods and categories over and over again. That's not the solution. That's not the thing. And it will never be the thing because we're not understanding food the way our body understands food. And we're definitely not understanding the clues that the body is trying to tell us about the issue, the real issues at hand with digestion, absorption, detoxification, and overall microbial balance. Like that's what we should be thinking about, and that's what we really should be looking at, right? So just like I said, big picture reframe. Make sure that we're not confusing relief with resolution, especially in the world of elimination diets, because it can be very tempting, but it's not the thing. Right? If this is something you've been struggling with, or you know a loved one that's been struggling with this, please get them connected to me and my work. They can click the link in my bio. That will take them to a page where they can sign up for my newsletter. They can download some freebie guides, and they can get in my calendar for a one-on-one consultation. Getting them, like I said, connected to my work, and if that is you, getting you some much deserved relief from elimination diets that you really deserve, right? So all of those types of things, like everything that I talk about, right, whether it's like testing for SIBO and yeast and fungal overgrowths and liver congestion, that's what I do in my practice, right? That's exactly what I test for. So look no farther than the practitioner right here, okay? I'll tune in next week, and I will see you guys for another episode of Learn with Lo.